Hey, again, everyone, it's RobbRyder. What is today? July 2nd, 2015. It's a Thursday. Working on my independence. Trying to get it done by July 4th. I may not make it, but we'll do it next week. This is about who appointed you. And we're looking at the vehicle code and where the rubber meets the road. That's pretty cheesy, I know, but it's where I am someday. I can be kind of cheesy. But I do want to tell you something. If you want to get a hold of me, don't leave messages in the frickin' video. Send me a damn email. My email's courtofrecord@aol.com. All right? I don't care where you got it from before. If you want to talk to me, the only place I'm going to respond to is at my email. Or the telephone, 616-712-6179. Donate if you can. All right? If God tells you to, please do. If not, who am I to argue? PayPal account is one way to do it, which is my daughter's name, Ashley, ASHLEYRYT, gmail.com, or snail mail to Robert Rytlewski, 10955 14 Mile Road Northeast, Rockford, Michigan, 49341. Why don't you pause right now and write that stuff down for future reference, and hopefully you can use it yet today. And I'll try to give you, a glimmer of hope of why you might want to. Because all this stuff you can check out yourself, right? I'm not going to go do the work for you. I just point things out, look at my laws around Michigan or whoever, a couple other places, right, where I'm kind of familiar with the setup. I don't want to go search out other people's stuff for them. You're going to have to do that yourself. But I will show you where it comes from, and, it's there for everybody. So let's take a look here. All right, Michigan has this thing called the Michigan Vehicle Code. Act 300 of 1949. And the first thing you should notice is this thing is almost 400 pages. Well, okay, it is 357 pages according to the PDF. How many pages of law does it take to drive a car from here to Myers and back? Well, quite a few apparently. And not having gone all through this, because of all that, I can tell you that within the first 35 pages is pretty much what I'm going to show you now, and the first 25 pages of that is just nothing but definitions. All right? This thing is loaded with definitions. Definitions, definitions, definitions. So for those who may be new to this kind of stuff and trying to research your way to a remedy, if you could find your vehicle code for your state as a PDF that allows you to go to edit and then hit find, and you could put in all sorts of search things. It makes it a lot quicker to search instead of trying to read the whole thing, because we're really looking for words and phrases that are being used, and then to see how they're being used in here. But one thing is for sure that, so here's an example: civil infraction, right? Wow, it's defined, determined. All right. Boom, 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 boom. It's all over the place. But the point is that civil infractions apparently are part of the vehicle code. And a lot of people, they're not really getting tickets, they're getting civil infractions. So I'm not going to use this to explain everything. I'm just pointing out, go find your vehicle code, see if you can find it as a PDF. Or like in Illinois, I couldn't find it as a PDF, but you could get it in a printable version and then copy and paste the whole thing. And then search it as a Word document, almost like a PDF. So that's good to know, but we don't need this for right now. So what I did do, though, is I pulled the pertinent parts out and I put it on a Word document. And so we'll be looking at that in just a second. But what did I want to look at? Well, I guess we should probably start with this. So first of all, Ro found this out from hers, so I put it at the top of this so I didn't forget to mention it, but everything after this very first part pertains to Michigan, where it says in hers, in section 2-107, authority to administer oaths. Officers and employees of the Secretary of State, designated by him, are for the purpose of administering the motor vehicle laws to do what? Well, to administer the motor vehicle laws. And any other laws relating to the use and operation of motor vehicles, authorized to administer oaths and acknowledged signatures, and shall do so without fee. So who administers the motor vehicle code? Officers and employees of the Secretary of State designated by him. Then why are you going to a court? You should be going to the Secretary of State's office. It seems to me they're the ones administering the law. Right? So in Michigan, and it looks like Illinois, they say the Secretary of State has something to do with the administration of the vehicle code. In Arizona, I believe it is the Secretary, or not the Secretary, but the Department of Treasury has jurisdiction over the motor vehicle code. So first, you need to determine who it is, or who you're looking for when you go to these license places to get your driver's license or whatever else you may have done in the past. But, so I guess the easiest thing to do is let's define some words, right? So, again, from here on down, now we're talking about Michigan Vehicle Code and no other. You're going to have to check on your own. But 257.20, highway or street defined. Highway or street means entire width between the boundary lines of every way publicly maintained when any part thereof is open to use to the public for the purpose of vehicle traffic. Right? So one thing you need to understand about a highway is it's built on a right-of-way, and the right-of-way is land that was a right was taken from the owners to put the road in, but not the property. They still own the land, but they gave up a right to put the road in, the right-of-way. But they're still the owner of the land, and if the road was to quit being used sometime, the land would revert to the owner. So that's where the highways are, right? So they're saying the highway is from boundary to boundary. That's been, that would be the ditches and, up to the whatever you would call the property line of the where your property starts, without realizing that really your property goes to the center of the road. So that whole area is, part of the highway. What's a driver? Means any person who drives or is in actual physical control of a vehicle. And I didn't say it had to be on the highway. It just says you're in physical control of a vehicle. You're a driver. Don't argue with it. Operate or operating defined. Be in an actual physical control of a vehicle. Well, it means you're a driver and you're operating the vehicle. Right? That would work. It's the same. So being in actual physical control of a vehicle is the same as a person who drives or is in actual physical control of a vehicle. Right? Because they're trying to be sneaky. This subdivision applies regardless of whether or not the person is licensed under this act as an operator or chauffeur. And, I just want to stop and point out that, for me, who had one time went down and got what I thought was a driver's license, when I look at it, it says it's an operator's license. It's not a driver's license. It's not a chauffeur's license. I got a chauffeur's license. They just talked about having a chauffeur's license, right? Chauffeur. And an operator. Well, I got the operator. Don't have a chauffeur. But they also talk about a driver's license. I don't have a driver's license. Oh, I wonder if the driver's license is actually a permit for me to be on the right-of-way, which is this land that's been taken from other people to put in a road, but they're still the owner, and it's my right to use the right-of-way. That's the public road that's been built on their private property. Because somebody needs to maintain the road. They gave up the property. Now who's going to pay to keep the road in good repair? Okay, so you could say, well, yeah, I could see why you got to pay a fee to be on the road. And well, that's the license we're not getting, in my opinion. We're getting an operator's license to operate a vehicle, but not a driver's license to drive the vehicle on the roadway. If you're on foot, that's different. You can walk down the side of the road. They won't give you a ticket for that, right? But if you're driving a car, well, that's a little bit different. Then you need to help pay to maintain the road, because a car is a lot harder on the road than somebody walking on it. Causing an automated motor vehicle to move under its own power in automatic mode upon a highway, street, regardless of whether the person is physically present at the automated vehicle at the time. Now, how can that be, right? You're an operator of a vehicle that moves under its own power, even if you're not there in that automated motor vehicle at the time. This subdivision applies regardless whether the person is licensed under this act as an operator or chauffeur. So they're making it sound like we don't have to be either, right? You don't need to be an operator or a chauffeur. But these things still apply to you as being to operate the vehicle. License means any driving privilege. Okay, well that's more what we're looking for. It's a privilege to drive on the road. Right? It's your right to walk down it. It's a privilege to drive. So maybe you need a privilege. License means any. Is that the same one again? Yeah, sure. Okay, because they're going to change it. That's what this is. This is effective July 28th, which is just a few days. So license means any driving privilege, license, temporary instruction permit, temporary license issued under the laws of the state pertaining to licensing of persons to operate motor vehicles. Okay. Local authorities means every municipal and other local board body having authority to enact laws related to traffic under the Constitution and laws of this state. Those what they call ordinances. So if you look at a ticket, a lot of times they could say you violated an ordinance. If you go to your city's ordinances, they'll have ordinances in there for traffic stuff or parked on the side of the road or all sorts of things that will have a corresponding thing in the motor vehicle. So you could either be charged for a local ordinance or a state violation. But since the people in the local offices aren't really holding the office because they're not properly elected, I don't know that they can do anything, and they're not charging you for a crime from the state because I don't believe these ever get turned into the state. And I'll show you a couple examples here in just a second. Owner means a person who holds legal title to the vehicle. Well, that would make sense. And a person, firm, association, renting a motor vehicle or having exclusive use thereof, right? So A has equitable use and B has legal. Or A is equitable owner and B is the legal owner. A person who has immediate right of possession of a vehicle under installation sales contract. Right? So, of course, that would depend if they actually lent you any money, and we can talk about those things some other time. Police officer defined. Peace officer who is trained and certified under Commission of Law Enforcement Standards Act. This is interesting. I just want to stop here for a second because I didn't know we had this before. But apparently there's an act to determine if somebody is a law enforcement officer or not. The Commission on Law Enforcement Standards Act, which in the definition says a certificate means a numbered document issued by the Commission to a person who has received certification under this act. Certification means any of the following: determined by the Commission that a person meets the law enforcement officer minimum standards to be employed as a Commission certified law enforcement officer. Well, ask them for their certificate. Right. I just did a video on certificates and elections, and how everybody who's elected should have a certificate of election. But prior to getting that, there's like 3 other things that had to be done: certified, put in a book, originals kept, sworn to. And if any of those aren't done, then the person isn't really elected. Well, same here. If the officer doesn't have the certificate, then he's really not a law enforcement officer, and he can't enforce the law. But moving on, and an authorized agent of the County Road Commission. Well, I wonder if that's who these guys who are deputy sheriffs are. Not sheriff's deputies, deputy sheriffs. Right? Do they really fit the criteria of fulfilling these other officers? Police officer defined, sheriff or sheriff's deputy, village or township marshal, officer of the police department of any city, village, township, and officer of the Michigan lowercase state police. Not Michigan State Police, proper name of an entity. No, Michigan, and then lowercase state police. Who is the Michigan State Police? Not really sure yet. Who's the peace officers? Well, at least I can say, well, they need to be in this book. Or in this law under 1968 PA 203, being MCL 28601. Proof of financial responsibility. Right? In damages for liability. So to me, it sounds like you need to have liability insurance. In the amount of $20,000, $40,000 for two, and $10,000. Right? So 20, 40, 10 is all the insurance that you're supposed to have to satisfy this act. And I don't know that it needs to be insurance. It could be a bond. Right? Because when a public officer takes an office, they get a bond to cover their liability. Well, why can't I get a liability bond? I can be bonded. Prosecuting attorney means the lowercase attorney general, the lowercase prosecuting attorney of the county, and the lowercase attorney representing local unit of government. But again, the places that you see aren't the government because those offices have been vacated. The attorney general and a prosecuting attorney for a county, for sure, they would have been elected to an office. Well, that means go check to see if they got a certificate of election. They don't. So those offices that have the title of attorney general and prosecuting attorney of the county aren't necessarily the people that we're talking about in this act for a prosecuting attorney. Registration defined means a registration certificate, plate, adhesive tab, or other indicator of registration issued under this act for display on a vehicle. Okay, so normally you get a driver's license, or a license plate, and you put that on the car. But this is talking about a registration plate, right? And in Michigan, the thing they call a registration is something put in your glove box. Well, this must be different. But in a farther section down, much farther down, it said registration taxes, right? Because you could search on registration, but there's a whole bunch of words, so I wouldn't do that. But, you might take registration certificate and put that into the fine section and just go through and see, well, okay, what is this registration certificate they're talking about? Or registration plate, right? Yada, yada, yada. But up to 3,000 pounds is $29. Residence address defined. This is very important, right? If I could stop, well, I can hit wood, right? If I was still an instructor in the Army, I'd pound on the floor because say, pay attention to this. Residence address means the place that the settled home or domicile at which a person legally resides as defined in Section 11 of the Michigan election law. I've been trying to establish my domicile for I don't know how long. Really, ever since I got started, when I went down to the township hall and tried to submit an act of domicile. Didn't work, but it doesn't mean it isn't correct, because you need settled home or domicile at which a person legally resides. Well, that would mean that everybody agrees that you reside there. And right now, we're not residing in the right jurisdiction. Hopefully that makes sense someday. Residence, as used in this act for registration and voting purposes, means that place which a person habitually sleeps, keeps his or her personal effects, and has a regular place of lodging. Stop right there. So this comes out of the election code they were talking about, this Section 11, where this is where it defines, right? Residence, as used in this act for registration, not necessarily to vote, but to register, because you have to register your natural and legal person within a jurisdiction, in the same jurisdiction, for you to have a sui juris legal personality. Right now, our proper person isn't registered in the right jurisdiction, and you go to court, they're going to have you as Ritluski, Robert Allen, or whatever your particular one is, instead of Robert Allen Ritluski, because I'm not properly registered. I'm going to say that's the reason. I'm just telling you, when you go there, that's the way it'll be, Ritluski, Robert Allen on the docket. And so all this is to show, here in a little bit, we're going to get through the definitions, and you're going to see, well, you could go to the person who's in charge of this and get them to certify a copy of your driving record. And on there, it would have, your address and everything else, and it would have anything that you had been charged with. And let's say you got a ticket in your hand that you've been charged with something, and you go here, and it's not in their system. You could say to them, well, how come this ticket isn't in that system? I believe this is a simulated legal process using color of law, and I'd like you to investigate. And that's what they do. Somebody has responsibility for this act. And somebody's charging you under the act. But did they have the authority to charge you with anything to do with the act? Or are they simply usurping an office to pretend they have this power and going to send you to a private court and get you to agree with them that you did break the law, pay the little pittance law fine, and pocket the rest of whatever it is they charged you? Webster says a place, right? So this isn't necessarily your house, right? Webster says a place is a city, town, or village. In what place does he reside? Well, that's what we're talking about, residence. City, town, village, right? So I reside in the township of Oakfield. I don't reside at 10955 14 Mile Road, Rockford, Michigan. That's my mailing address. I reside within the township of Oakfield, which is the smallest self-governing jurisdiction in my area. It's the municipality, basically, right? That's why it's city, town, villages. Those are all like municipalities. And a town is the same as a township. Resident defined. Resident means every person who resides in this state and establishes that he or she is legally present in the United States. This definition applies to provisions of this act only. Right? It's going to mean something else somewhere else, but for here, establish that he or she is legally present in the United States. Well, you know, this is about the fact that right now you're not seeing. Forget that they call you a United States citizen. You're not a United States citizen. Your property may be a United States citizen because they made properties a person, but you're not. You and your proper person don't exist in their system. You've never gone to register. They got your property. It's on the name of, here in Michigan, that's what's on your driver's license or your operator's permit. All caps. Right? But where's my proper person name? It isn't there. So we're going to try to fix that. Fix our residence. Or at least I am. Right of way defined. Right of way means the privilege of the immediate use of the highway. And we need this privilege to use the right-of-way because the right-of-way is a roadway built on other people's private property, and the only right they gave up is the right for the road to be there. But it's still their property. So it's a privilege to use their property. You need to get the privilege. Secretary of State means the Secretary of State of this state acting directly or through his duly authorized deputy, investigators, agents, and employees. Now again, means the lowercase Secretary of State, not necessarily the title called the Secretary of State, but the person who fulfills the functions of the Secretary of State. In this state, all lowercase, I don't really know who they're talking about. However, from that I can't tell, but we're going to see if we can figure out who it is. Sidewalk means a portion of the street between the curb lines. I just point that out that, okay, the sidewalk is still on the street. Right, that's still part of the roadway. Or right away. Streets or highways defined. Street or highway means the entire width between the boundaries of every way publicly maintained when any part thereof is open to the use of the public for purposes of vehicular traffic. Well, it's still, the sidewalk is part of the street. And this said streets or highways means the entire width, so up through the sidewalk is part of the street. State. Okay, we had Secretary of State. Now let's define that. Means any, lowercase, state, territory, possession of the United States, Indian country, as defined in 18 U.S.C. 1151, District of Columbia, the Dominion of Canada, and any province or territory of the Dominion of Canada. Those are all states. We're all the same. There is no difference. Shall. Look at, they even defined it. Shall and may defined. Shall and may means shall is mandatory and may is permissive. Shall, most powerful word in the dictionary if you make them follow it and say, well, it says shall, so you shall do. And if you don't, then if you don't want to do that, then I need to talk to your boss. when a reference is made in this act to division, the reference is to the Secretary of State or an authorized representative of the Secretary of State, which is an interesting thing to say because I checked on the word division, and it isn't used very much as division, but subdivision's used all the time. So it's like, oh, okay, well, this would be the authorized representative. The subdivision of the Secretary of State is the authorized representative. I guess. I mean, I don't know. I couldn't find division used very often, but they took the time to define it. And so if subdivision can be part of a division, then, well, maybe it means something. But okay, here's another biggie, right? Pound on the wood. Secretary of State is exclusive state agent. Except as provided in this act, the Secretary of State is the exclusive state agent for the administration of the driver's license provisions of this state. Now, it's been quite a while since I've been into the Secretary of State's office where you would normally go to get whatever paper they give you. But it seems to me when you walk in, you got a counter, with all the counter trolls there, and that's the line they try to herd you to. Take a number, step up here. But over to the right, in my particular building, is an office. And if I'm not mistaken, there's a picture of the lady on it and everything else, and that person there is actually the representative of the Secretary of the State. And these other people are a private enterprise working for a fee for the Secretary of State. And we keep going to the fee people and not the branch office of the Secretary of State to talk to the branch person who is there to represent the Secretary of State. So whoever that is, when you're looking at them, that's the Secretary of State. I accept your oath, bind you to it. Remind you got a fiduciary duty. Extending my sovereign immunity while you carry out my orders. Subject to civil service laws of this state, the Secretary of State shall appoint deputies, subordinate officers, clerks, investigators, and other employees as necessary to administer this act. Okay. Right? But the Secretary of State is the exclusive agent to have anything to do with driver's license. It didn't say operator's license, and it didn't say chauffeur's license. It said driver's license, and I want the frickin' driver's license information. Okay, now things you might be able to use if you're going to court. Central file of individual driving records. The Secretary of State shall create and maintain a computerized central file that provides an individual historical driving record for a person with respect to all of the following. That may be out of order, but we'll get to that in a second. But 204 first. Administration and enforcement of act, right? Except as provided in this act, the Secretary of State shall observe and enforce and administer this act. Who? The Secretary of State. Do what? Observe, enforce, administer. They execute the law. What do they execute? Well, they execute the Michigan Vehicle Code. So when you get a ticket, why are you going to the district court? You need to go to the Secretary of State's office. Apparently. But this is interesting. The Secretary of State shall not establish a highway patrol. So it's not the Secretary of State who's pulling you over. They don't have a highway patrol. So if you got pulled over, it wasn't by the Secretary of State, who's the one who observes, enforces, and administers this act. So somebody has to swear that you've done something wrong. Well, they would have had to anyways, but the point is the people who are there to enforce the law aren't the ones who pulled you over because they shall not establish a highway patrol. The Secretary of State may proclamate rules pursuant to Act 306 of Public Acts 1969. That's the administrative code of Michigan. And so I need to go and look at that because maybe this lowercase Secretary of State actually is over that also. Because I don't all the elected offices, as I pointed out yesterday in the video, if you were to search them out, them people aren't holding that office that you're reading about in the election code as an elected officer, because they don't have a proper oath or a proper bond, or they didn't put in a proper affidavit of candidacy, or they don't have a certified results of the election, and blah 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 blah. So they're not the government. So it's this, it's all this common case, not proper case, just common worded. Who are these people? Right? The Secretary of State shall adopt an official seal. Lowercase Secretary of State. Back to the central file, though. So, central file, this is what we talked about before. So this is what's in that central file. License issued under a person under Chapter 3. Conviction, civil infraction determination, or other licensing action that is entered against the person for a violation of this act or local ordinance substantially corresponding to the provisions of this act, and that is reported to the Secretary of State by another jurisdiction. If they gave you a ticket, they need to tell the Secretary of State. They're in charge of the frickin' code. So you go to the Secretary of State and ask them to pull up your record and see if that ticket you got in your hand's been entered on your record. And chances are it won't be, but if it has been, well, so it has. It didn't hurt you to go find out. So how do I take care of this when you're there then? A failure of the person, okay, so this is more things. A failure of the person, including non-resident, to comply with suspension issued pursuant to 321A. So I don't know what 321A is, but we may have had our driving privileges suspended because we never properly registered our legal address. And it's that simple. That's what this registration is about. That at one level, it's you registering in a place, your natural and legal person. And maybe if you don't, then they're going to suspend your driving privileges. This would tell you if you have suspended driving privileges per this 321A. Cancellation, denial, revocation, suspension, restriction of the person's operating privileges. A failure to pay a department or state driver responsibility fee or other licensing action regarding that person. So again, if there's anything against you at any particular time, then it's going to show up in this report, right? This central file of individual driving records, certified copies of evidence. Well, that's what we're going to get. Electronic certification. Use of computer-generated certified information. They can just go to the terminal and pull it out. But it's even better. We'll keep going. So if you've had any accidents, a conviction, driver record requested and received by the Secretary of State under some 307, any notice given by the Secretary of State will be in there. Any other information received by the Secretary of State regarding the person that is required to be maintained as part of the person's driving record, all that stuff will be in there. A Secretary of State certified computer-generated paper or paper copy of an order, record, or paper maintained in the computerized centralized file of the Secretary of State is admissible in evidence in the same manner as the original. It is prima facie proof that the contents of the facts stated. Right? So if it ain't on the Secretary of State's website, it didn't happen. An order, record, paper generated by the computerized central file of the Secretary of State may be certified electronically by the generating computer. The certification shall be a certification of order, record, or paper as it appears on the specific date, certifying that on this date, this is what the record showed. A court or the office of the clerk of the court of this state, which is electronically connected by a terminal device to the computerized central file of the Secretary of State, may receive into and use as evidence in any case the computerized generated certified information obtained by the terminal device from the file. A duly authorized employee of the court of record in this state may order a record for an individual from a Secretary of State computer terminal device located in and under the control of the court, and certify in writing that the document was produced from the terminal and that the document was not altered in any way. Go to the clerk of the court, tell them to pull up your damn driver's record, take in this law, tell them to pull it up, certify it, put it in your court case. Right? It'll say, well, how come you're charged in Rutluski, Robert Allen when my name is Robert Allen Rutluski? Look at the damn file. You got the wrong man. Oh, by the way, this charge isn't in here. Right? How come the charge that you're charging me with hasn't been entered in the Secretary of State's website? Or not the website necessarily, but the database. But going on, after receiving a request for information contained in records maintained under this section, the Secretary of State shall provide the information in a form prescribed by the Secretary of State to any of the following. A, B, C, D, and E. I only care about C, the person who is the subject of the record. I want a copy of my record. I'm going down to get one. Conviction of attempted violation. When assessing points, taking license or registration actions, or imposing any other actions under this act for a conviction of an attempted violation of a law or local ordinance substantially corresponding to the state, the Secretary of State or the court shall treat the conviction as the same if the conviction for the offense, for the completed offense. They want to charge you for the attempted violation. We thought you were going to break in, so you violated it. Right? That's what they want to do. And so you're going to this private court where they're going to get you to confess that they're correct, that you meant to break the law, and then it will be treated as a conviction for you having actually completed the offense, without anybody ever putting any paperwork in to the Secretary of State charging you with a crime or with any kind of violation. The court shall impose criminal penalty for the conviction of an attempted violation of this act or local ordinance substantially corresponding to the provisions of this act in the same manner as if the offense had been completed. Just because you attempted, or they say you attempted, right? You're alleged to have a debt. Not that you have one, you're alleged. Right? So, if they can convict you for allegedly having a debt, then they can convict you for allegedly attempting to violate an act and then treat it as the same as that you had because you didn't go down to the Secretary of State and say, hey, I don't agree with this. Secretary of State offices and branch offices established. Employees, bond, liability, blah, blah. The Secretary of State shall maintain an office in the state capitol complex. Lowercase, state capitol complex. I have no idea where that is. And in other places in the state, as the Secretary of State considers necessary to carry out the powers and duties vested in the Secretary of State. Well, whatever powers and duties the Secretary of State has is going to be in other places in the state as the Secretary of State considers necessary. At least one office shall be established in each county of the state and in each city of the state having a population of 10,000 or more, but not within a radius of 5 miles of the county office location. Okay, whatever. But at least one in every county. This location does not apply in a county having a population of 300,000 or more, not contiguous cities having a combined population of 10,000 or more. A person licensed under Section 248 is not eligible for appointment to conduct, manage, or be an employee of a branch or fee office of the Secretary of State. And I don't think we want a fee office. I think we want a branch. I believe that branch is different, right? Office and branch offices is what it's talking about. I don't know what a fee office is. I may ask him what a fee office is, but I'm going to find a branch office. Because that's where it's been, whoever there is the one who has the powers and duties of the Secretary of State. A bond may be required if the office established under Section 1. Secretary of State shall not be held personally liable for loss of money because of armed robbery, larceny, embezzlement, riot, act of God, or other act of a person resulting in the loss of money which is within the authority and responsibility of the Secretary of State as administrator of that act. So the fact that somebody's, armed robbery, they walked up to your car with their gun on, made you sign a piece of paper, and they're going to take your property, antitrust activity, embezzlement, whatever. You can't hold the Secretary of State personally liable, but you can hold the state liable, not the Secretary of State. You can hold them officially liable, but not personally liable. I'm going to put it that way. A person appointed to conduct a branch office, right? There it is again. And they're appointed. Oh, who appointed you? And then we'll find out who the Secretary of State is. Shall receive compensation fixed by the Secretary of State and the necessary expenses of the office. Yada, yada, yada. Forms. The Secretary of State may prescribe and provide suitable forms of applications, certificates of title, registration certificates, operators and chauffeurs' licenses, and all other forms requisite or deemed necessary to carry out the provisions of this act, the enforcement and administration of which is vested in the department. Well, maybe they have complaint forms too. Maybe that's where you go put in your criminal complaints. Because it sounded like they may have something to do with the administrative code, and so that has all the other things that happen to you in it besides the motor vehicle code. You know, like I'm dealing with the Consumers Energy, who's supposed to be, they say they're the utility, but they don't have a franchise with my township, and according to the state constitution, every public utility has to have a franchise with the township. Well, they don't have one. And digging in further, they don't really exist. And digging in further, the rate book that they gave to the Michigan Public Service Commission is wildly incorrect compared to the law. And the regulator didn't do anything about it. And those laws are part of the administrative code. And so if this office has anything to do with enforcing the administrative code, my point is I could take to them the rule that isn't being followed on some kind of complaint to the Secretary of State, and then they can do whatever needs to be done with it. Or are they saying that all they have jurisdiction over is the vehicle code? And I find that highly unlikely. But they have the forms, right? And this is why you want to find the appointed person, the person appointed to the branch office, and ask them for the forms from the Secretary of State. Don't get in the line with the cattle and go over there and grab a number and go stand over there and say, no, I need to talk to that woman or man whose picture is on the wall. Or whoever it is. Administering oaths and acknowledging signatures without fee. This is good too, right? An officer or an employee designated by the Secretary of State for the purpose of administering the motor vehicle laws shall administer oaths, shall, and acknowledge signatures without a fee. Well, then they can certainly administer an oath on my federal criminal complaint, AO-091. Write it down, go find one, AO-091. You look at it in the bottom, it's what you should fill out as a complaint, and at the bottom you got to have somebody take your oath. And if you went here and had these people take your oath, because they have an official seal of the Secretary of State, that's the seal that's going to go on it, not the seal of some frickin' public notary. It'll be a seal from the Secretary of State. Or for whatever else we need it for. I'm just saying. An officer and employee designated by the Secretary of State for the purpose of administering the right. So the person who's in charge of this damn motor vehicle laws, administering the laws, right? That's executing these laws, shall administer oaths. If they can administer you an oath and acknowledge your signatures without fee, and they're sitting in that office, then chances are you're talking to the person that can give you whatever else you need for a remedy. But we need to point out these particular sections, in my opinion, right, to them to say, I want to do it this way. I don't know how the people are doing it over there standing in line, but I want to do mine this way. I want this information from you. I'd like to list all your forms. If I could, please give me one of each, so I can go home and study them. I like to study paper. I really like to read people's forms. Some people build models. I look at forms. Oh, by the way, you got a procedure for filling it out? I'd like to have that too. Okay. The Secretary of State and the officers designated by the Secretary of State shall prepare under seal of the Secretary of State. Well, there you go. There's that Secretary of State. And deliver upon request a certified copy of a record maintained under this Act and charge a fee that is set forth in this Act. A certified computer-generated or paper copy of a record maintained under this Act shall be admissible in a proceeding in a court in the same manner as the original record and shall be prima facie evidence. You don't need to do anything else. It's prima facie evidence as soon as you put it in of the contents and of the facts stated on the record. Because you know why? Because it's going to have the Secretary of State seal, not the local county and not some fucking, excuse my French, not a notary. No, Secretary of State seal. Let's see him not pay attention to that. An order record paper generated by the computerized file of the Secretary of State may be certified electronically by a generating computer. And you've probably seen this before. Sometimes if you're downloading PDFs of files from state agencies or federal agencies, they have like a blue or purple border around it, and you can't change anything in it. Well, if that's been filled out, right, that is a certified copy. Now, it's only in the computer, right? When you print it out, it's no longer a certified copy unless somebody says it's a certified copy, or somehow it says that it is on this particular date. They're doing something a little bit different than theirs with these here than it sounds like I've read being done with, in my mind, how I see other ones that I can get my hands on. So I've gotten a lot of things from the government printing office, the GPO, and they have this border on, and you can't highlight it, and you can't cut or copy parts of it. There's really nothing you can do to alter the document. And they say it's certified. But this goes even further to say it was certified on a particular date, it sounds like. Yeah, get one and find out. Okay, but a court or the office of the clerk of the court in this state that is electronically connected, again, right, they can get a copy. Go to the clerk, say, I need you to pull a copy to see if this ticket's on there. If you want to wait till your court date, or, go to the Secretary of State's office local and talk to that person there. A duly authorized employee of a court of record of this state. Now, this is great. When you find this person, you're going to know that they're working for the court of record. I've been looking for the court of record. I've yet to find one. You don't go to courts of record. If it was a court of record, they would be using a seal. And they don't use a seal, they use a clerk stamp. A duly authorized employee of the court of record, the court would have a seal. Of this state may order a record for an individual from the Secretary of State computer terminal device located in and under the control of the court. What court? Well, the court of record. And certify in writing that the document was produced from the terminal. And the document was not altered in any way. Well, jeepers, that sounds like foolproof evidence. Hand that to the judge. Judge, this is not my... I don't know what we're going to find when we get the record. That'd be the first thing. But I'm saying when you go get the record, it's not going to show these tickets that you have pending. It may show you were convicted for attempting something because you did that before and on a different one. But on the one you might be dealing with today, as I'll show you a couple of examples of, right? I don't believe that those would have made it to their system yet. Because they don't fill the paperwork out completely. Okay, application for registration. The department shall examine and determine the genuineness, regularity, and legality of every application for registration of a vehicle. Right? So who has this application of registration? Well, the Secretary of State does. Don't go pick one up off the counter. Go find the person, the Secretary of State. I need this application of registration. For a certificate of title or for any other application lawfully made to the department. Well, what else could I make? What other applications do you have? I'd like to have a copy of every possible application you have. And the manual that shows how to fill it out. Can you email that to me? Right? You got it on electronic. Here's my email address. Just email it. I really don't want to have the paper anyways. I don't want to cut the trees down. Just send it to me in an email. Title registration certificate. Right? So this is a registration certificate of some kind, which was different than what we saw before. Or maybe it isn't. Permit, license, or plate, that's the same. The department is hereby authorized to take possession of any certificate of title, registration certificate, permit, license, or registration plate. Right? Not a license plate, registration plate. Issued by or upon expiration, revocation, cancellation, suspension, blah, 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 blah. Okay. The Secretary of State may publish a synopsis or summary of the laws of the state regulating the operating of vehicles and may deliver a copy without charge as the Secretary of State may deem necessary. Well, I want a copy of that. Michigan, MCL 257.211. Doesn't matter what state you're from. Right? If you want to go look at this so you can get your own copy, you could just get this law and go find this in your law or take it to your place and say, what do we have that's similar to this? But the Secretary of State may publish a synopsis or summary of the laws of the state regulating the operation of vehicles and may deliver a copy without charge as the Secretary of State may deem necessary. May publish a compilation of laws of the state relating to the ownership and operation of vehicles or other laws related to the other laws relative to the Department of State that have nothing to do with operating a vehicle. Well, those would be good to know. The Secretary of State shall establish a selling price for the compilation and may revise, raise, or lower the selling price of the compilation to reflect changes in preparation, printing, and distribution costs. Well, if it's all electronic, it should just be free. Just send me a copy. Here's my email address. Right? Put me on your list. Money collected from the sale of the compilation shall be credited to a revolving fund created by this act known as the Michigan Department of State Publications Fund. Okay. Well, that's good to know. I have to see who's in charge of that. And, because maybe it's used for other things too. Well, who else is, excuse me, Michigan Department of State. Who else is there, right? Let's find them through the publication fund. Method of giving notice. If the Secretary of State is authorized or required to give notice under this act or other law regulating the operation of a vehicle, well, you broke the law, unless a different method of giving notice or otherwise expressly prescribed, notice shall be given either by personal delivery, you've been served, to the person to be notified, or by first-class mail, addressed to the person at the address shown by the record of the Secretary of State. We need to make sure that address is correct. That's why we're not getting our mail. Right? They got the wrong address. Wrong jurisdiction. MI instead of Michigan. Something like that. Ro was showing me on a building permit application she had. I mean, this is a whole different subject, but think about this, because you don't have a certificate of occupancy for your house if you own a house. If you want evidence of it, wait till they come and do some work to it, because they're going to come and put a certificate of occupancy on your house while they work on it. Right? Well, why would that be? Does that mean the house is vacant? Why does it need a certificate of occupancy? Yet they're going to go ahead and do that. They're going to put one on. But when you look at her, the last building permit that was pulled when they came to put siding on because of storm damage, for her address, it doesn't say Illinois. It just says St. Charles. Doesn't give a state, doesn't give anything else, just St. Charles. Right? She's not a resident of the state. Not a citizen of the state. She's stateless. Right? So if they're supposed to give you notice and they don't have the right address, well, then you're not going to have gotten it. But that's true enough. But the truth of the matter is they're not sending you any kind of notice because they haven't been noticed yet that you have a court case. That's all going to go in after the fact. Amended methods of giving notice. There really isn't, right? It's either you've been served or put it in first-class mail and tell me from the Secretary of State's office that I have a traffic violation. Not from the private district court down the road, from the person who says they're a district court judge, but if you went and read the election law and said, well, a district court judge should have a certificate of election, and then ask him for it, I don't believe they're going to produce it. And when they can't, well, then you're not this obviously isn't the district court talked about in the law, so who the hell are you? Is this a public or private hearing? Officers and investigators. The Secretary of State and officers and investigators of the department whom he or she designates have the following powers. inspect any vehicle of a type required to be registered under this Act, and the salvageable parts of a vehicle of the type required to be registered under this Act in any public garage or repair shop or in any place where blah, 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 blah. Okay, those are inspectors. In enforcing the provisions of the subdivision, the Secretary of State and officers and investigators shall have the powers of peace officers. Well, a peace officer can arrest you. In fact, a peace officer is the only person that can arrest you. And to be a peace officer, well, they got to be badged and yada yada. Oh, look at badge. They're going to have one. But they also get to examine the books and records of all persons licensed under this Act pertaining to the selling, buying, leasing, dismantling, brokering, wrecking of vehicles of a type required to be registered under this Act and the payment and collection of tax provided for in this Act. Oh, they're charging with a tax we didn't know. The powers of peace officer for the purpose of enforcing provisions of Subchapter 5. There you go. Secretary of State shall issue each person named under 213 of this Act, that was the one above, a proper badge of authority. Ooh, we need to highlight that. All right, I want to see a proper badge of authority. Designating the position held by the person to whom issued. Every such badge shall display a distinctive serial number. Neither the Secretary of State nor any other person shall issue any such badge to any person who is not duly employed, an acting officer or investigator of said department. In other words, they don't have the authority to enforce this Act unless they have that damn badge. Vehicle unregistered or without certificate of title. It's a misdemeanor for any person to drive or move or for an owner knowingly to permit to be driven or moved upon any highway or vehicle of any type to be registered hereunder, which is not registered or which a certificate of title has not been applied for which the appropriate fee had not been paid when and as required hereunder, except as provided. There we are. Unregistered. Well, I don't know if you need to register your vehicle or not. I know that you need to register yourself, but I don't know you need to register your vehicle. But I'm going to go there and find out because they, that's what it said. Where is it? Right here. 257, 211, right? Secretary of State may publish a synopsis summary of the laws of the state regulating the operation of vehicles and may deliver a copy without charge as the Secretary of State may deem necessary. Secretary of State may publish compilation laws of state related to ownership and operation of vehicles and other laws relative to the Department of State. That'll tell you what you need to do. Don't argue. Go get the book. Read the book. Say, well, this is what it says. And it says, you shall do this, and you over here, you shall do this. And my job now is to make sure you both do as you shall. Vehicles subject to registration and a certificate of title, right? Exceptions. Every motor vehicle, recreation, trailer, semi-trailer, pole trailer, when driven or moved on a street or highway is subject to registration and certificate of title provisions of this Act, except the following. And so you could go through here and try to pick one out that you say, well, I don't need to have one because of this, but right, a vehicle that is driven or moved on a street or highway only for the purpose of crossing the street or highway from one property to another. That's the only reason I'm on the road. I'm going to leave my property and go to somebody else's. So I don't have to have a registration. I was just going from one property to the other, Your Honor. I believe that that I don't have to have a vehicle registered then, according to 257.216, the Michigan Vehicle Code. B, a vehicle that is driven or moved down a street or highway only for the purpose of crossing the street or highway from one property to another. Right? Didn't say I had to cross all the way over. I don't know what cross means. To me, it means I get on, I go down 2 miles and, get off on the same side of the road. I still cross the highway. I crossed into the right-of-way. Right? Because that's the highway. I crossed into the right-of-way. for the purpose of going from this property to another property. Any vehicle subject to registration but owned by the government of the United States. I'm the government of the United States. Right? The United States is governed by the people. We may send representatives, but we're still the government. They just represent us. But we're the government. Right? Okay, so you don't want to be a citizen of the United States. Fine. Let's just say you're the government of the United States. And I got a Secretary of State. I'm going to go down there and talk to her and file a complaint against you. So you got all sorts of reasons, but I'm not going to read them all. Application for registration certificate of title. Out of state. Here's the thing about the semicolon, right? Anytime you use a semicolon, whatever follows doesn't have to have a damn thing to do with what was before. Like a comma would just be continuations of explaining the same subject, basically. But if they use a semicolon, it doesn't have to have a damn thing to do with what was said before. So application for registration and certificate of title, out-of-state vehicle, form, fee, signature of owner, contents, leasing, yada, 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 temporary registration, imprint, backside of check, so forth and so on. Not one of these has to have anything to do with the other one. But in all that, an owner of a vehicle that is subject to registration under the Act shall apply to the Secretary of State upon appropriate form furnished by the Secretary of State. Again, you want it from the Secretary of State for the registration of the vehicle and so forth. And one of the things they want on there is the owner's bona fide residence. That's your true residence, and we've never established that. So even if the registration form that you normally go get and you fill out is the proper form, because you haven't registered with the Secretary of State, they don't have your bona fide residence. And so they can't send you any mail. Right? You put whatever you want on this piece of paper for the registration for the vehicle, but that doesn't mean it's your bona fide residence. And your residence is your place, and your place is your city, town, village. And it was very long, so they didn't put it all in. Then they had another one about application for operators or chauffeur's license. Well, I have an operator's, right? But then there's that damn semicolon. Documents to be supplied to verify citizenship or identity and legal presence. Well, that's what I want to do. I forget the rest. I want to do that. What do you need for me to verify my citizenship or identity and legal presence? If you want to say I'm not a citizen of the United States, that's fine. Then I'll say I'm a national of the United States. Put me in as a national. Put me in the book. And that I have a legal presence here because I'm a natural-born Native American. I'm born of the soil of America, and you can't take that away from me, and therefore I have a legal presence. But because they messed up your birth documents, and they actually registered you as a adoption, and put your Social Security account in the name of a fictitious entity with a middle initial, that shit needs to be straightened out somehow. And I just think this is the way we do it. We're going to take them the information for citizenship. And we're going to say, I'm the owner of this Social Security account, so can we fix that too? Because you're my Secretary of State. You're going to fix my records to my satisfaction, so I'm no longer harassed by these people who aren't in the state. Registration taxes on vehicles. That's what I said before. And, so here it is. I mean, this is what it costs. $29 for a 3,000-pound car. That's what it should cost to register your car. Right, up to 10,000 pounds, $95. That's all it should cost for you to register your car, your vehicle. Amended personalized registration plate. They didn't call it a license plate. They call it a registration plate, right? We want a registration plate. If we have to have something, it'll be a registration plate. And so that was it really on motor vehicle code. It's, like I said, it's almost 350 pages long. Got lots you could read, and pretty much everything I just went through in mine is on the first 35 pages of it. But one of the things it talked about in there is how what you tell them at the Secretary of State ties into the qualified voter file. It doesn't mean you're registered to vote. It just means that you're qualified to vote if you decide to. And this is the domicile thing. Right? So somewhere in the Motor Vehicle Code it told you to go to this 5090, which is actually in the this is in the election law. Shall establish technology to implement qualified voter file. The qualified voter file shall be the official file for the conduct of all elections held in the state, lowercase state. After 1998, the Secretary of State may direct that all or any part of a city, township, village registration files shall be used in conjunction with qualified voter file at the first state primary, yada, yada, yada. Notwithstanding other provision, law of the contrary, a person who applies to vote in an election and whose name appears in the qualified voter file for that city, township, or village, school district is considered as registered voter. Now you're a registered elector of the city, township, village. My point is, you need to get on this list, it looks like to me, to establish your place in the city, township, or village, or it could be a school district, because in Michigan, school districts, for whatever reason, they can be the local government. Right? So, but not, you don't have to vote. Right? If you want to vote, you can. Then you're supposed to be, if you show up at an election and you're in the qualified voter file, then you're considered registered to vote. A registered voter of, this is the thing, of the place, the city, township, or village, or school district. The Secretary of State, a designated voter registration agency, or a county, city, township, village clerk shall not place a name of an individual into a qualified voter file unless the person signs an application as prescribed in 509R. The Secretary of State or designated voter registration agency shall not allow a person to indicate a different address than the address in their Secretary of State or designated voter registration agency's files to be placed in the qualified voter file. All these addresses are going to finally be the same. Okay. Now, so it said, unless the signs an application prescribed in 509R3, where is 3? A person whose name does not otherwise appear in a qualified voter file shall be placed in the qualified voter file only if the person signs under penalty of perjury an application that contains an attestation that the applicant meets all of the following requirements. 17 and a half, citizen of the United States, resident of the city, township. You got to be able to do those. And this attestation means they need to do this to you under oath. Right? They're going to attest that you said you were. So you can't attest to something you did. You can attest to something somebody else did if you're an eyewitness. Right? So this is where it's done under penalties of perjury and under oath, but they're just not using the words under oath. Contains an attestation. Well, that was something done under oath. The clerk's going to attest that you said that you're over 17 and a half, that you are a citizen of the United States, and that you are a resident of the city, township where the person's street address is located. Well, my street address is located in the township of Oakfield, not in the city of Rockford. My mailing address may be Rockford, but my street address is in the township. And so, the Secretary of State's got the official document or the official record of what your residence is, and we haven't, I don't believe, done what needs to be done to be put in the right one. And when you go, even if you voted, and you go to the township, or whatever, those offices you walk into, those people aren't holding those offices. They're not properly elected. They didn't take the proper oath. They didn't file a bond. They don't have a certificate of election. Their election wasn't certified by the election board. They're not holding the oath. In fact, in my township, what it looks like is they have a thing called the Planning Committee, I believe is the name, is the official name. Township Planning Committee, something like that. And they're the ones that are in charge of the zoning ordinances and so forth, and that if anybody's acting as the government, it's them. And they're all appointed to offices. And for them to be appointed to an office, they have to be a qualified elector within the township. And a qualified elector is a qualified voter. You don't have to be registered to vote. Just need to be qualified to vote and have it be registered that you're qualified to vote within your city, village, or township. Okay, so now some examples of what what you might be able to do with this stuff, right? This is something that I didn't know this at the time. I read this as I was really because of this. I was looking at the law closer, but it's a ticket. This is what they look like. This is the uniform law citation, right? This is what all jurisdictions are supposed to use. It's uniform. Every state's got, I'm not going to say every, most states have some kind of uniform citation they're using. And it looks like this. Okay? Now remember, the Secretary of State says they don't have any highway patrol. And they're the ones who enforce the law. So it's not the state that's coming after you. It's the people of the city of Greenville that apparently want you to admit that you somehow broke some law. That they don't have any power themselves to enforce, so they need you to agree to confess that you broke the law. Or you attempted to break the law. All right, so this was for my son, and as you can see, where is it? Right here, the person named above in violation of local ordinance, state law, administrative rule. They didn't check any boxes. Right? MCL site pack ordinance. They wrote some number in here, but they didn't really define what it is. Charge number 1, I guess, right? But they don't have any offense code down here, right? What did he do wrong? Nothing. And then you go down further where it says court. It doesn't say when to go to court. Hearing date says 14 days. Well, obviously they're not filling us out by the law. I don't believe there's any place in that motor vehicle code where it's going to say they're going to do this. But I'm not going to go look for it. I'm just going to say, hey, they didn't do it this way. But here's the kicker. And the 3rd District Court of Montcalm County. Right? This isn't, they don't want you to go to a state court. You're going to some county court that has uppercase Montcalm County. You're going to corporate court, private court. Is this a private hearing or public? Apparently it's private because there is no 3-district court in Montcalm County. It's the 64th District Court. Montcalm County is part of the 64th District Court. The 64th District Court isn't part of Montcalm County. Right? The court has jurisdiction over this county. In the hierarchy. Right? This is a private court. The state court would be the 64th Judicial Circuit Court. But this is saying go to the 3rd District Court. Judicial District. Yeah, the District Court. 64th District Court, they call it. This says the 3rd District Court, and there isn't one in Montcalm County. And not only that, the officer didn't sign it, right? Officer's name printed. E something. No, that's not your name. No. Is that the name that's on your birth certificate? No. Greenville Public Safety. Is that an entity that has jurisdiction over the Motor Vehicle Code? Well, not according to the Secretary of State. It says they have jurisdiction over the Motor Vehicle Code. Well, who are these people? And they say it's a civil infraction, right? It wasn't a motor vehicle infraction. It was a civil infraction. Which is handled under the Motor Vehicle Code. Now, I didn't write the law. They did. So whoever this was, committed perjury. And so I had written something to this group at the city and handled it that way. And then when my son went down there, they said, is your dad the one who wrote the letter to me? He said, yeah. And he just put a seal on the piece of paper and my son left. But I'm going to go down, I'm going to take this. So here's my plan. I'm going to take this down to the Secretary of State's office and get them to admit that this is incorrect, first of all. And then when I have them there, then I'll go into the part about now I want to register and so forth. And instead of trying to explain all that to them, I'm going to take them a problem first, get their agreement that I'm correct, and then say, and now I want to do this other part of whatever this section is out of this motor vehicle code. Right? I want to go down here and get these books they're talking about. And I want to get a copy of my record. And I may want you to administer me an oath. And I want to make sure that I'm registered in my town, village, or municipality by whatever name. Dum-de-dum-de-dum. So, right, so this ticket's got lots of holes. Let's, the biggest one is, off the bat, is, see, here it is. State, operator, or chauffeur, or CDL. Well, okay, it doesn't say driver's license. But here's driver's license number. Right, so I'm just confused on that part. But I guess not, because they really didn't charge him for anything. Well, that's why you didn't get anything from the Secretary of State to say you've been charged with anything, because they didn't charge you with anything. They're going to try to get you to agree that you were incorrect. So the way this normally would work is this is a civil infraction, and you wouldn't go to the administrative hearing that you're supposed to have, and they would get you for contempt of court for missing a civil infraction. Well, now you have a civil contempt of court, and they can hold you in jail for that as long as they want to, because you didn't take care of the civil infraction. And so if you get a ticket, run down to the Secretary of State and say, hey, is this in your system yet? Give me a printout of my record as of today, or call the clerk of the court and say, apparently you have access to the Secretary of State's information. I want you to pull my record because you're not charging me, you're charging this fictitious person. My name isn't Ritlewski, Robert Allen. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so this is a minor thing, but here's one that's, much more near and dear to somebody's heart. Here's a guy who's being a felony complaint. And it had to do with, starting out that he doesn't have a tag in his car, ends up being a felony. Well, because he may have argued with him. Right? It's all good. You touched me. Now it's a crime. And so the people of the state of Michigan, and again, this isn't the government, because the government is the state of Michigan, not the people of the state of Michigan. The style of the government is the state of Michigan, not the people of the state of Michigan. This is a private attorney general trying to get you to agree by whatever means necessary that you are guilty of a felony. And because you never go to the Secretary of State's office to appeal the decision, they can pretty much do whatever they want to. And the longer this goes on, the more bold they get. But, I'm always looking for blanks, and the first one I came across, well, there's no complaining witness. Here's the victim or complainant. Okay, well, Sergeant Scott, scribble marks. But there's no complaining witness. I wonder if that turns up anyplace else as we read along. Well, let's find out. Oh, the complaining witness says. Well, there is no complaining witness. So the complaining witness didn't say a damn thing. Right? They didn't put a complaining witness in. But count 1 is a felony, count 2. But it all started with number 3, right? That this guy was driving a vehicle that was unregistered, contrary to MCL 257-215. Well, my question is, did the guy that stopped him have the jurisdiction to enforce that law? Because that is under the jurisdiction of the Secretary of State, and the Secretary of State doesn't have any highway patrol. So who just pulled me over? Do you have a certificate by the... oh, shoot, I closed it. Whatever that Michigan Act was. I don't think so. All right, so this is what the first page looks like, right? So, again, the big thing is, hey, there is no complaining witness. And forget the felony. We never would have gotten there. It's not a felony. This guy was pulled over on the side of the road for antitrust behavior because whoever did it doesn't have the jurisdiction to pull anybody over. Show me your certificate that you can pull my ass over. Go down to the Secretary of State and see if this was ever put in, because there's still no complaining witness. In fact, I got to call Wayne and tell him that. And then what they do, right, sneaky bastards. So upon conviction of a felony or an attempted felony, right? Remember the attempted doesn't mean you had to. You just alleged a felony. Court shall order law enforcement to collect DNA identification profiling samples. This on the second page of this, right? Now remember, these are 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper. If this was 8.5 by 14, this would be on the bottom of that first page. You can see why they don't want to have it on there, the way they do stuff. There is nobody who signed the damn complaint. Complaining witness's signature. Well, there was no complaining witness on the other page. Right? What are they going to do? Come back here and add it later? Oh, there's a thought. And whoever scribbled their name here didn't put their bar card number. It says bar card. Where's your bar card number? Judge, magistrate, clerk. Looks like they said they're the magistrate. But I can't read who it is. I don't know who it is. I know that warrant authorization on by somebody here, Cynthia Uzinski. She authorized a warrant. Well, is that warrant now in the state system? Let's go find out. Peace officers only. I declare that statements above are true and correct to the best of my information and belief. Well, is he a peace officer? If he was a peace officer, he wouldn't have to go before the magistrate to swear out to his complaint. But the complaining witness has to. He didn't say he's a peace officer. But the complaining witness, there isn't one. It's John Doe. And so the complaining witness never said any of this. That on March 24th, Alpena County, Michigan, the defendant, contrary to law, did A, B, and C. They didn't speak. So, there you go, right? I think that you may want to get into your Secretary of State's or into your vehicle code to see if you can find out who it says is in charge. And the easy place to find it for us was under the authority to administer oaths, right? Somewhere in there, what's it talk about administering an oath? Who can do that? Find that person, you're in the right office. And then the questions to ask them will be built around that by what you find in your vehicle code. And without going through the whole thing again, I'm going to leave it there. But the Secretary of State, as exclusive state agent, except as provided in this Act, the Secretary of State is the exclusive state agent for the administration of the driver's license provisions of this Act. Not the operator's provisions, not the CDL license provisions, not the whoever the other people are. Chauffeurs. None of those people. The driver's license provisions. That's the section that we're interested in, so you need to find the person that's representing the Secretary of State. Except as provided in this Act, the Secretary of State shall observe, enforce, and administer this Act. This is their baby. And they shall not establish a highway patrol, so it isn't them that gave you the ticket. So whoever did's got some splaining to do. Okay, you all have a great day, and I hope you found it useful. Right, go down and talk to the Secretary of State. That'd be next.